Running events often seems like a waste of time. I mean, why go through the hassle of managing countless vendors and running around dealing with issues on the day when you can just run virtual events and basically create great content? Well, color me wrong, because today's guest has shown me that there's far more to event marketing than keynotes and sponsors. Danielle Messler, head of marketing at Founderpath, has a methodology that squeezes as much long-term value from in-person events as possible. Through SAS Open, they bring together thousands of B2B leaders every single year. And in this episode, Danielle shares how they avoid stale and boring keynotes by enforcing a specific structure, one that's welcome by speakers and attendees alike. We cover how to take event content and make it evergreen, events as a brand building tool, the production workflows, distribution, the whole hog. On top of this, we dig into how Founderpath is offering an attractive alternative to dilutive capital for SaaS startups. And we also dig into why teachers actually make the best marketers. Enjoy.
Let's jump into it. Let's go back to what we were talking about just a second ago, then before we hit record. Like I seem to have assumed correctly that you are the architect of all things growth at Founderpath. I'd love to, first of all, learn a little bit more about your role there. And for people who aren't necessarily familiar with what Founderpath is, what is it that you guys offer?
Yeah, so I'll dig into Founderpath as a whole first. So Founderpath, my approved marketing line that I came up with, we help SaaS founders grow faster with several things. So we have our main product, which is non-dilutive capital. We do like receivables purchasing agreements, and we also do term loans, which is a little jargony. So maybe we can, edit that at some point to make it sound sexier. But basically, we help SaaS founders grow faster without taking a piece of equity. So not every SaaS company we think needs to have VC backing and go for the moonshot of becoming unicorn, and it's actually hurt a lot of companies. So we are trying to provide a different option for, we call it, the silent majority of these lifestyle SaaS companies that we think it's a great lifestyle. You're making $10 million a year, you have a small team, you control your life. So those are the founders that we really help. And as I said, we do that through kind of three primary things. The biggest one, the moneymaker, is obviously your capital product, just term loans and revenue-based financing. And then we also have our free tools. We have a whole dashboard of analytics that you plug in, your Stripe, your bank accounts, and it gives you all these different insights. And we also have a big piece of it, which is our founder community, that we really do view content and community as its own product. So that's the Founderpath spiel.
I like the Founderpath spiel. I noticed, I was tripping over my words there because you mentioned community, and I was looking into this last week. Founder-led, is that the name of the community, right?
Yes. Yeah. So we have our founder-led community.
Nice. Very cool. There seems to be some interesting workshops on there, which we'll dive into a little bit later. So there's a lot going on there. Seems like you've got three revenue streams, for lack of a better word, right? There's the financing, there's the community, and then the tools. So what is it that you do? How do you bring this all to market as a one-person marketing team? Obviously putting that very generously. I'm sure you'll push back on that term, but I'd love to hear about, how are you doing it all?
Yeah, so you're right. I will push back. I do think, technically my title, head of marketing, but as we know with titles at startups, they don't usually encompass all of the things or, give you kind of a fair view. But I will say it takes a village, right, to market a SaaS startup. And so I lead, our marketing function. And I have to say, I kind of am like a co-architect with Nathan, our CEO, who the reason Founderpath exists and we've had such early success is really a testament to him building his own audience and deep, deep understanding of our customers, our community, before Founderpath was even named Founderpath. So I've been fortunate that I learn a lot from him and we complement each other in a lot of ways. So yes, one-person team leading a lot of the marketing efforts, but I do have kind of a partner in crime, if you will.
Who is that? Oh, so Nathan is the partner in crime, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
The crime boss.
Everyone knows who Nathan is, right? So did he kind of, because obviously he has the name of his magazine, I forget. Is it Latka?
It's Latka. Yeah.
Just Latka, just the surname. I like it, right? Very old school. Exactly. Very specific to the SaaS space. Did he have an idea of this was what he wanted to build, or did it emerge after all those years kind of operating in the space?
Yeah, so it's actually a really interesting story that flows into kind of our ethos and mission critical goals at Founderpath. So I'll give you, the abbreviated version that he was in college, started his own SaaS company called Heyo, and he was, I think 19, 20, and they had bootstrapped it to $1 million in revenue, which is awesome. And then, you get the call from the VC funds at C Revenue, and they're like, yeah, we want to invest in this. So he got, I forget exactly how much the round was. VC, they came in, they wanted to replace him as CEO because he was like this 20-year-old kid building it from his dorm room. And so, eventually they got an acquisition offer. And it was, I think it was like $6 or $7 million or something. And he was like, I would have made millions of dollars at 21 years old. And the VCs shut it down because they now owned the controlling, a controlling share of the company, so they could shoot that down. And because they wanted it to go on and be this unicorn, that's kind of the VC business model. And he ended up, I think they sold later on. He was like, this was never going to be $1 billion business. But it was cash flow positive. So they ended up later on selling it at kind of a loss. And he was like, what the fuck? And so after that, kind of figuring out what the next thing he wanted to do was, he started his own podcast where he just interviewed SaaS founders. They're if you know Nathan Latka, the podcast, love it, hate it. And he's done over I think we're at 3,400 interviews now. There's pretty consistently been one released every day. And it's really amazing to see the system he's built there. But through that process, and that's what I mean by he just deeply knows SaaS founders, and specifically within, the big umbrella of SaaS founders, the bootstrapped, the capital efficient, the ones that, pejoratively have been called a lifestyle business, and understands their needs. And kind of out of that, he would start talking, recording ends, they're just kind of shooting the shit. And a lot of them are like, yeah, I would love $1 million to grow. That's not, this crazy amount in the whole scheme of things when you see rounds for, I don't know, how much does Sam Altman want? $7 trillion.
Something ridiculous.
Yeah, something ridiculous like that to build chip factories. But so he actually started writing his own debt checks into some of these businesses. And then he was like, this is a lot to manage. I need a dashboard of some kind. And that was the very first version of Founderpath. And he's like, wait, why am I doing this with my money? I can go out and find capital partners. And that's how Founderpath was really born. That's the origin story, if you will.
Yeah, so he's kind of scratching an itch that he wished he was able to scratch when he started, right? There's almost sounds like there might be a chip on his shoulder that kind of led him to, do you know what? Not everyone needs VCs. People want to be able to do what they want with their own companies. If I can't sell it, what's the point?
100%. And just having that a control. And I mean, I think we've seen this so many times, especially in the last few years, where we had, the crazy heyday of 2021, where you could, spit into a napkin and get a $50 million seed round. And excellent phrase. Love that. And, we're seeing a lot of those companies that might have been good businesses, viable businesses making 10, 20, 30, even $50 million a year, but they had to aim for these insane growth targets that just weren't ever feasible. And now a lot of them are folding under that pressure. And a lot of it was meeting these expectations, maybe for VC appearances or, what's the thing you do? You raise a round, you go hire 100 people. And we're seeing all the layoffs and consolidation. So these are really we like to think of them as software companies that are probably going to be around in 30 years, just slow grow, not even slow growing, just, very quickly growing, sustainable growth, and have customers that just really love it.
Yeah. 100%, 100%. That's all fascinating. It's good to hear the story of where it came from. I love a good founder chip on their shoulder. And obviously I'm applying that own phrasing myself, but I love those stories.
No, it's totally true. And I think we all kind of have a little bit of that edge to us. You need to, that's one of the things, if you listen to Nathan, you'll hear him say like, and this isn't, anything crazy unique. I've heard it somewhere else, but like, it's nice to have like an enemy, if you will.
Yes.
In marketing.
Yeah.
Give people something to like stand for.
Yeah, exactly. The us versus them narrative device has worked for the direct response folk for years as well. So
exactly.
Awesome. So since meeting you back in October, a few months ago at SaaS Stock, every now and then I like to peek at websites and whatnot. And obviously after you agreed to chat with me today, I had another peek at the Founderpath website. And I swear every time I look, there's some new big initiative, whether that's like SAS Open, which we'll get to shortly, or just some kind of like massive content initiative. So I'd love to take a step up. I'd love to learn a little bit more about what is actually moving the needle for you guys at the moment, because it looks like you're doing a tremendous amount of activity. You're kind of doing, or rather, bringing all of these revenue streams to market, for lack of a better word. What's working for you at the moment? I want to dive into the playbook.
Yeah. So I can share some of our, secret sauce, and I like to think about it as we have this one kind of keystone piece, and that is SAS Open. That's our conference. And we are really, really ruthless about who we get on stage. So SAS Open is our owned and operated conference. Founderpath owns it. We operate it. We had done a few under different names. Like we did one called FounderConf. We did one called Founder 500. And we found that a lot of people thought it was like our user conference. So we were kind of missing out on some people that are like, why do we want to go to your user conference? So then we shifted the branding a little bit, SAS Open. And that is really our cornerstone of all of this content that you see, all these different initiatives. Like that is like, I'm trying to think of a good metaphor. That is like I'm going to get really 2020. That is the sourdough starter that then makes all of the other things that we have. Sorry, that was a horrible metaphor.
That's giving me PTSD, Danny.
So we developed these relationships with really awesome founders, and a lot of we really want to find the operators, the founders that are, founder CEOs that are in the weeds, like really doing the work, that have their finger on the pulse of, why their companies are doing well. And the whole conference is really framed around teaching. So I like to, and this is my very lofty comparison and aspiration, like I want it to be the TED of SaaS. Like we have a very specific format that all speakers follow. Like we don't care who you are. Like Henry Schuck from ZoomInfo, he's coming to speak and like he is following this template.
Okay.
And it's
what's the template?
So it's broken down into, so it's 20 minutes. They're about 7 minutes each and 3 sections. And then within each of those sections are 3 subsections. So there's a lot of thought that goes into this format. It is generally about how long human beings can pay attention to one thing and actually retain that information. And then when it's broken down in that 3-3-3 format, it just helps you retain it a lot better. So you're learning a lot more. So that's kind of what goes into it. And then we're also able to then, it works really well for us because we're able to chop that up into all of those different pieces of content that you're seeing. So then those keynotes then become, we have a whole resources page where they're actually chopped up into courses. So it looks like Udemy or, a master class or something that you go, and we break it down into all these little sections. So we really get a lot out of that content. Another thing that we require from speakers is, we call them artifacts. And they're basically like, if you're teaching how to grow through SEO, let's just say an example. Like we actually require proof that you've done that. So like, let us see your Google Analytics screenshot. Like, let's see the email copy you use to drive 1,000 G2 reviews, if that's what you're saying in your presentation, so that other founders can then take that and make it their own. So it's not just, I found that some conferences, the keynotes get very, very lofty and they're very hard to make actually like actionable for me, at least, where I'm like, yes, I know the platitude. I'm sorry. Like it doesn't help me like go into my job tomorrow and actually put it into use. There's a time and a place, don't get me wrong. But that's at least the angle we're taking with our conferences.
Yeah. Try going to your boss and saying, I just went to this conference and we need more actionable insight. Your boss is going to turn and say,
we need to provide value.
Exactly. The boss will go, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah. They'll be like, great. You just read your first marketing book. Congratulations.
Exactly. Yeah. Marketing 101. So it's kind of like you're asking these speakers, the other kind of founders, marketers, etc., that you have on stage to put the proof in the pudding, so to speak. Not just talk about their expertise, but have you actually done it? Can you prove that you've done it as well? Which brings a bit more credibility to what you're doing.
Exactly. Because we want to, see that you've done it. And I feel like we get a lot of, at least some of the, again, those talks I've seen that are like, we hit $1 million in revenue. And it's like, okay, but you also raised like $500 million in funding. So I would hope that you had $1 million in revenue by then. So
there's a chasm.
Again, it kind of speaks to the founders in our community that are, trying like a lot of different things. And we and the other thing that I find really interesting is we've also had speakers come up and they were like, hey, we tried this and it failed miserably. And here's how we turn the ship around. Because that happens, more often than business. And I think we're conditioned to talk about. There was a handful of those that do really well, because a lot of founders are like, yeah, I went through that and I felt like I was on an island.
Yes. 100%. I've been there as well. I've been there. So
yeah, we all have.
Yeah, you realize. Yeah. Leaning into, so it kind of sounds like SaaS Open is the centerpiece of all the content that you're creating and putting out there. I want to lean into like the founder-led aspect of it, because I looked at that and it's funny you said it's a Udemy style offering, for lack of a better word, because it kind of looks like that.
Mm-hmm. That was our inspiration, if you will. If you go into the early specs we built for our front end design team, we were like literally like screenshot, like we like this, we don't like this, like make it our own.
Yeah, right. And I can see that's definitely come through. Either way, original version or otherwise. So you take some of these keynote recordings and I guess upload them into this community, so to speak. Obviously, being very reductive here, but how has the distribution impact helped you to kind of drive new business for Founderpath? Bearing in mind, I think I saw somewhere that you either only accept 3 to 4 deals a week, or that's kind of the average. Like how does that all kind of feed into the ecosystem of growth for what you're doing?
Yeah, so we have, and this might sound a little reductive, like basic marketing, but we have like our leads that will come in with like super high intent already, that are like either in the market, they know they want money, like they know that they're ready, maybe they're already looking at some competitors, they're coming to us for options. So like those, I think, obviously are, the hottest leads that we have a wholly different process for. This is our, for lack of a, better explanation, just our really like our nurturing community. Like something Nathan says and that we've had adopted as an ethos as a company is like, we don't sell capital, we don't sell tools, like we sell ideas. And a lot of that content is formulated around showing other founders, teaching them, having founders teach other founders like what is even possible. And especially when you don't have that big VC backing, it feels like very hard to go and grow and do these things. But then I remember this one review we got in our Trustpilot from someone who had just taken the first tranche of capital. And this was someone who had signed up a full year before they even got involved with doing, a deal with us. And he was like, I didn't realize how small I was playing because I was, scared to spend the money. He ended up putting it into recruiting. And he was like, I always had this kind of scarcity mindset because, I'm not VC. I don't have this huge runway, all these investors to back me up. But, with Founderpath, I took, a little bit of money that wouldn't have been available to me otherwise And not only did it help me grow my business, but it helped me like change my mindset a little bit. And that wouldn't have been possible without that full year of the suite of events that we do, from like the in-person conferences. We also do a monthly webinar that are genuinely really fun. I hate using the word webinar because it really feels like a live TV show. Like Nathan literally we rent a studio in Austin and have like a video team. And like we've put a lot of thought into the production behind this as another kind of like keystone like event. Sorry, I haven't had enough coffee this morning, so words are hard to come
That's
by.
okay.
But,
Events, webinars. If it sounds like a duck and looks like a duck, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so we have that kind of as like our monthly touch point, if you will. Like it's the right cadence we found for getting people together, and they're very fun. And that's another way we kind of leverage some of that content as well. Like we already have 150 potential guest speakers for those webinars to then come teach live again. And it's really not a lift for them if they've already spoken, because we already have their decks that we've worked with them on. Like I'm literally, after we chat today, that's what I'm doing for our February webinar, is like having two of our speakers have already spoken with us. So I'm just kind of repurposing that, and then we'd be like, hey, how does this look? And then they just get to hop on. It's great.
Amazing. Incredible. So these kind of live webinar events, again, for lack of a better term, you have kind of like a live audience as well, so to speak, or like attendees?
So we average about 1,200 registrations per month. And then I'll say about 45% of them show up. Like our highest live attendance was just over 500, which is awesome. And we really we optimize for live attendance. We want people to show up live because they are very interactive. Like it's not just a talking head. Like Nathan like literally scans the list before we go live, and then he looks at everyone live, and like he'll call you out.
Yeah.
Like he'll be like, Tom, I haven't seen you before. Tell me what you're building. And we, prompt people probably every couple of minutes or so to either like take a poll or interact in the chat, so that it's not just kind of one of those, set it and forget it webinars that we've all been on, where I'm just like, all right, I'll put this on in the background, like pretend like I'm listening, but I'm actually have like 7 different screens up and I'm still working.
Yeah. We've all been there. It's good that he, kind of jumps into the audience, right? Kind of like a Graham Norton style.
Yeah, and it keeps people engaged. And
Graham Norton, I don't know if you know who Graham Norton is. Sorry, I just threw that name out there. UK talk show.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
No,
sorry, as you were saying.
I don't remember what I was saying, but I do love Graham Norton.
Everyone does. That's why you were at SAS Doc. That's the only reason you guys go to SAS Doc.
Exactly. I'm actually getting married in Dublin, so also the other reason.
Excellent. Okay, we'll talk more about that after we've jumped off. Where was I going? Right, it sounds like you're kind of leveraging all these events to create a lot of content in a lot of places. We've talked a lot about owned content in that regards, and I know a lot of my listeners are going to be thinking, but what about distribution? What about awareness and extending like your audience and your reach? How do you guys go about doing that?
Yeah. So that is my primary focus, probably the next couple of quarters, is really building out that machine, and making it, more efficient. So like to think of it, and I did not come up with this system. It's from Emily Kramer at Market One, where it's like we have all of this fuel, which is the content, the keynotes, and each piece of those keynotes, right? So we have the actual video, we then get them transcribed, we then turn those transcriptions into blog posts. So we have all of that raw fuel. Right now, the focus is really like supercharging that engine, which we have a couple of channels. Like email, our email list is very strong. That's probably the biggest form of distribution right now, which obviously isn't like, bringing in net new eyeballs, but it is keeping people engaged with us. I'm very proud that our open rate is like usually close to 45-50% with a list of over 8,000. Because people and you can tell, when you're running an email list, like when people reply, and like I send it from me, and I literally write like I'm writing to a friend. Like the newsletter I sent out yesterday for Valentine's Day was like, I started with like, hey, Bridget, like have one founder in mind. And I was like, wanted to make sure you got a love letter today, and got like so many responses just being, I'm very cheesy, but sorry, getting into the weeds a little bit on the newsletter piece. So that's kind of, one channel. Right now, I've also kind of gotten back into, it's a very low hanging fruit, but just like a daily LinkedIn post from the brand account. And this does go back into the like solo marketer team where there's a lot to execute, and obviously only so much time, so much energy, so much focus in a day. So that is where one of the challenges, I think, comes in. So yeah, we're experimenting with different, kinds of distribution channels. Like, SEO is a big investment for us this year. And also kind of leveraging our relationships with those speakers to have them do a bit of the distribution for us as well, like making it super easy and getting some of these, bigger names that have good audiences, like Eric Sue. I just posted about one of his talks with us. He's also going to be a webinar guest this month. So kind of the co-marketing aspect of it as well.
Yeah, partnerships are incredibly powerful for that purpose.
It's a huge channel, especially in B2B. I've found kind of one example going back to our webinars is we last year went really heavy into partnerships and co-marketing partnerships. And we would get these companies that, said they had these massive lists of, we have 160,000 people on our newsletter list. So I'm like, yes, this is going to be a slam dunk. I'm going to get like 1,000 registrations just from this, going to smash all my goals. And then I, check the tracking and it's literally 10 registrations and all like poor fits. But we work with someone else, and I'll name drop him, Ben Murray, he's the SaaS CFO. It's a very niche. He has a great following though, and they really trust him. And we've been working with Ben for years now, and he's, a really solid partner of us. And like, he'll send an email and it'll drive 200-300 registrations on a much smaller list, and they're way better fits. So it's really finding those kind of niche or those like heavy hitter relationships. And he's like, I wouldn't call him like a traditional influencer or like creator, but that is what he is. And he has the trust of his audience so much more so than this like kind of big generic list that just like talks about the number.
Yeah. Oh man, it's a tale as old as time, right? Audience size does not equal engaged audience. And that anecdote is just yet another testament to that. Yeah.
And it was really interesting to, see and go through. And it's like, you intellectually know these things. And then you see the actual results. And I'm like, yeah, I will partner with Ben all day, every day over these, big ones that come in and are like, yeah, we have this huge list and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, but you didn't derive results from me. So like, sorry.
Yeah, exactly. You've got numbers to hit, right?
Exactly. And, it's got to be a good fit for everyone to feel really, really good about it too.
About a year ago, you posted this LinkedIn post about how everyone is becoming a media brand. Yes, I did stalk your LinkedIn account a while ago, right?
I love it.
It was this part of the post I found quite interesting. And I quote, "As every company becomes a media company, there's generally two tracks, education and industry news/entertainment, HubSpot and ProfitWell. On the whole, both teachers and journalists are dealing with burnout and low pay, but they're highly skilled. And those skills perfectly match what content teams need. Teachers can create curriculums to help educate users. Journalists know how to make the mundane interesting and find the best angles that capture attention." So I found the teacher element interesting because so many of my guests I speak to got into marketing from the journalist world, but I don't know that many teachers who got into it. Are you seeing more teachers enter the marketing world? And more importantly, do you think more of them should be?
Yeah, it's so funny you remember that post because
I did a bit of digging and it stood out.
No, I love that. That I remember that one like doing very well, and still like sometimes look at a random like or comment on it and I'm like, oh, wow, I'm relevant. Yeah, so that was actually inspired by a former client I was working with, they were my client, and then they had a client who had hired 2 teachers to build up a lot of their like educational content. Because one of the things that like marketers aren't trained in actual like how people learn and how to build a curriculum and, teach lessons that people actually remember. But if you go into somewhere like HubSpot Academy, like you can see the thought and the time they put behind that. And I don't know that they were teachers that they got, but it's very formulaic, for lack of a better word. Like you can tell it's actually got thought behind it into how you design a curriculum, which is a very scientific process. Like that's why you go to school, to be a teacher, to learn how to teach. It's not just, you can spout a bunch of words and people learn. It's very like it's a scientific process. And I think that is something that a lot of marketing companies are trying to build, this function, this being a media brand, and maybe repeating the post a little bit. And there are these 2 tracks you see, right? Like, and I've worked at Profitwell. Like I see the media brand where we had all of these fun shows and live events, and it was much more the, journalist media route. And then you have something like HubSpot, which is HubSpot Academy, where it is very education based. Like you get certified and inbound in email marketing and blah, blah, blah. And I think that route is really valuable. And it's not like the sexier one, right? It's not like I'm building this media brand. Like no one's like, I'm going to build a bunch of courses so that people can learn things. But in a way that's more relevant and it's more evergreen too. Like I think you're going to get a lot more juice out of that over time than you are maybe some of the like, point in time media where it's, daily news or, this company tear down, whatever. And that is a really great place for teachers to plug in, I think, and especially in the US. I mean, there is this cultural difference, but teachers, especially after COVID, the burnout of constantly being on, still having to teach remotely.
It's exactly the same here. Yeah.
The pay like really isn't great, especially compared to what you can get. Yeah. And if you get to come in and like still do what you love and, teach, design curriculums and actually get paid very well and have, maybe you don't get summers off, but that's also a misnomer that like teachers here don't actually get summers off because they're then designing curriculums for the next year.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%. There's still work to be done.
So, anecdotally, I've seen, some of the larger companies that maybe have these more established programs or have maybe a bigger budget behind them in education have been looking to former teachers to build out those programs.
Yeah. It's interesting you talk about courses because, they're not so sexy, but I always, whenever I come to an inflection point in my career, even as a founder now, it could be operations, it could be, hiring senior executives now, for example, I will always find a brand that's created some kind of guidance or even a course, and I will lap that shit up every single time. So sexy or otherwise, I know the whole media brand thing is in vogue right now. I think some of these principles still work like gangbusters, right?
They still do. And what's the first thing you do? And I mean, this is what I do is like, I try to find, and like, no matter how basic it sounds, like ABM, that's something that, you think every marketer knows, but like, I'm sorry, I don't know the ins and outs of it and how things are defined and all of this. So like, that's one thing I'm working on learning now. And like, I go to HubSpot because they have a great, like just general overview of it. And like, I want to take a little course and like learn about it. Just to, get your feet wet. You don't maybe necessarily go and read, a news story about ABM. You want to learn how the mechanics work.
The first principles for, again, throwing another buzzword in. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that is maybe the less sexy, like content media brand route. But I think, and this is, wholly my opinion, you don't have a, data set to back it up. But I think that over time, that will be a gold mine. I mean, look at HubSpot. They did HubSpot Academy, 10 years ago.
And the rest, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember diving into it back in 2011, I think, for the first time. So.
That was Mark Killens, who was a champion of that program at HubSpot, is a mentor of mine who I've learned a ton from. So he's definitely helped shape some of these opinions, but have seen the kind of the fruits from that labor still come to pass.
Yeah. It's also a testament to, and we could get into the weeds here, I know we're out of time, but I've got to say, like, some of the foundational stuff does get a little bit of flack, especially on social media. You know, you talked about webinars earlier, and yes, we feel a bit icky using the word webinars, but they are what they are and they still work. SEO is dead. I see that every day, but people still investing in people. It still works like gangbusters. So I feel like one of the biggest takeaways from this conversation is some of the old shit just works.
I had I was very proud of this very nerdy subject line and email kind of send. Last month, our webinar, I ended up, the angle was kind of, these dead marketing tactics that are actually like, they all still work. Everyone's claiming like, millennials killed email, millennials killed this, like this tactic is dead. They're never actually dead. It's just like the shittiest version of them dies.
Exactly. That's such a good way of putting it.
The subject line was, I don't know if you're a Game of Thrones fan, but it was like, what is dead may never die.
I like
it was all around kind of these dead tactics, but it's like, no, they don't actually ever die. It's just like I said, the shittiest version of them dies. Like spamming mass people via email, that's like so generic. Like, yeah, of course that doesn't work. That is the shittiest form of cold email and cold outreach. Like, yeah, it's not going to work.
Yeah, it worked once upon a time, but marketers ruin everything.
Right, when email was a novelty.
Exactly. What a gem to round things up on. I do have one last question before I let you go. It's one I like to ask all of my guests, and it's a very simple one. What are you working on at the moment that you are most jazzed about? And we may have already talked about it, to be honest.
Yeah, so I'm going to cheat and have two things, just because one is SAS Open. It's coming up at the end of March. So we're in kind of like crunch mode on that. All of our speakers are finalized. We're working on final content, all of the fun parts of it. We're going to have this like founder bookstore that I'm really excited about.
That's cool.
If I could kind of boil it down to the thing I love most is really creating really unique experiences for people that they'll remember. So that's kind of my bread and butter at these events. Like, what's the like one key moment they'll remember aside from, the speeches and stuff. So we're working on that. And then getting really into the weeds on the distribution flywheel I'm trying to build for specifically this resources kind of asset that we have. Like, how do we make it kind of a SaaS behemoth, if you will? All of these courses that we get, and we're about to get 120 more from SAS Open. How do we get more eyeballs on them? How do we get, match founders that are looking for those resources to maybe the tip that they're looking for? So how do we make that connective tissue? So getting really into the weeds on that is kind of my next quarter or two. And I'm honestly probably a big piece of the rest of the year. And I'm very excited about that.
It sounds very exciting. It sounds very exciting indeed. Distribution is important. Danny, thank you so much. Where can people learn more about you?
Yeah, you can always find me on LinkedIn, just Danielle Messler. And yeah, I'm on Twitter at Danielle is Messy.
I love the handle. Fantastic.
Gotta have a good pun on the last name.
Perfect. Awesome. Danny, thank you for spilling all the beans about what you're doing at Founderpath. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.